The most broken combinations, I think, come the beginning of Origins is going to be Yam plus Buzz Noise. I think this for two reasons. Yam is going to apply poison to all enemy Axies, making it really powerful, but it's actually a bit of a nerf because the number of cards that hit more than once has gone up. Yam would be super efficient. So how did they balance that? They made it hit everything once for free, as opposed to, like, say them using Tri-Feather and say Feather Fan and then hitting an Axie 8 times and getting 8 stacks of Yam. So Yam would be absurdly powerful in Origins. Buzz says, attack all enemies, shuffle 1 Daze into your opponent's discard pile. What does this mean? We get a Yam and guarantee we get at least 1 poison stack on all our enemies' Axies, and then we use Buzz for 1 energy and attacks all enemies for 20 damage. So if poison doesn't change in the way it works, because I imagine in Origins, poison's only going to affect at the beginning of your own turn. So instead of it triggering every single card that gets played on your turn and your opponent's turn, which are like one and the same currently, in the future, I think in Origins, it'll only trigger 2 damage per stack of poison at the beginning of your turn, like an upkeep, like on tap, upkeep, draw kind of thing in Axie Origins. But Daze, I imagine it's going to be a lot like Slay the Spire, where Daze is just a card that your opponent can't use. They can't cast it. They can't use it in like some type of discard for another cost action. They can't do anything with it. So it's like if you draw 6 cards and one of them is the Daze that you draw, you know, after they do their reshuffle on their deck, Buzz could be absurdly powerful. And I'm imagining that it with poison will be very strong. So you hit everything with poison. If poison works the previous way, hit everything with poison and then hit it all for 25. You get a poison trigger and that 25 damage can add up. So you might be using multiple of these. So a team with just 3 Yams and 3 Buzz might be strong enough to carry a team. I'm not entirely sure on that one. Let's get on to my second idea. Theory crafting that I've done. I haven't really messed around with it too much, but I am pretty certain that this bug is going to be the worst bug to play against. Not because of the reasons you think, but because the way these type of discard things function in Slay the Spire. Whenever you draw a Daze or a Jinx, I imagine in Origins that these cards are going to be cards you cannot use, that take up your draw, they're useless. It's basically like you did not draw a card that round, right? So these guys have that effect on every ability. During Venipot's leak, where he got banned for this leak, it says Tadpole, 65 damage, 1 energy. It says shuffle 1 Jinx in your opponent's discard pile. If we look at Snail Shell, 1 energy, target an ally next turn. After the target is attacked, next turn, shuffle 1 Goo into your opponent's discard pile. So, I think all these are going to have a very similar effect. We're going to put lots of dead cards in our opponent's deck, which is brutal. So we're discarding cards. It's like the same effect, right? But it's delayed until the first deck reshuffle. So all these cards have a similar effect of delaying our opponent's actions. So we put 4 of those, thinking that I'm thinking that Parasite is going to have a very similar effect to Tadpole, Sticky Goo, Thunderclaw. 4 of these, so 2 of these bugs just constantly messing up your opponent's redraws, putting a bunch of extra dead cards in your opponent's deck. You play something really powerful on your third Axie. I don't know what that's going to be. Maybe you play the Yam Buzz. You play like Garish Worm, Grandma's Fan on one of your Axies, so they can like hit all the Axies at the same time, and they're poisoned, and then you're just constantly doing effects like Sticky Goo and Jinx and like putting Jinx cards and dead cards in your opponent's hand constantly. That's what I think the meta is going to be at the beginning. Not maybe initially. Initially, the poison's going to be everywhere, so you might want to get yourself a mint, or because the new mint's really strong, and then Biden's. You might want to start off with a triple Biden's team because poison's going to be all over the place. But this team, I think, is going to have it's going to be in contention. That's for sure. My second team that I think is going to be very strong in the next meta has something to do with backdoor poison. Another poison comp, but I think it's going to be very strong. Grandma's Fan. Right now it does 120 damage and applies chill for 2 rounds, which really hasn't seen a lot of importance in the meta. It could be very good against the bug and beast meta with all the last stand. But I think Grandma's Fan in the new meta will be very good. In the new one, it does 25 damage, it attacks all enemies, apply vulnerable for 4 turns. So I think vulnerable is going to make them take bonus damage to their next attack, and Grandma's Fan being 1 energy, hitting everything for 25. So you might be on that same Yam team. So you Yam, you Buzz, you Grandma's Fan. So you poison everything, you hit everything for 25, and then give it vulnerable, and then your next attack hits everything for 25, and maybe takes bonus damage because they're all vulnerable. Something along those lines I think could be very strong. Let's get into my next big idea. Now, I just wanted to mention that Barb Strike has a big change as well, and that compounded with the Yam being a 0 cost can be very, very strong. Let me talk about it. So Garish Worm, 2 energy, does 120 damage, but applied 2 poison per attack card played this turn. So you use Yam, which is a 0 cost, an attack, hit everything, they get poisoned. You use Buzz to hit everything for 20 damage. Maybe you use your Grandma's Fan, but you use Garish Worm, and now you're going to put a bunch of stacks on something, and it does a massive amount of damage. So I think some like Yam, Garish Worms, Buzz, Grandma's Fan, backdoor could be very viable. If we look at the wording of Bone Cell, it says target ally, next turn, after that target is attacked, draw 1 card. I don't think that's a limit of 1. I think this card will be on every tank at the beginning of Origins. I think this triggers similarly to Cattail, how every time it gets hit with a beast or bug card, you draw a card. Bone Cell will have that same type of effect, where it is drawing you multiple cards per turn. So I think this card is going to be a champion. It's going to be on all the top contenders. So I think a tank like this, not this exact tank, and remember, none of this is financial advice. This is just what I think will happen. So a Cattail in the new version, if I go to Cattail real quick, 1 energy, 50 damage, but it applies taunt to this Axie for 4 turns. So if you're with me, Cattail's 1 energy, Bone Cell 1 energy. We shield it for 60, we do 50 damage, and we force our enemies to attack this Axie multiple times to get multiple draw triggers. I think this type of Axie could be fantastic at the beginning of Origins. I have to keep prefacing everything with that, because who knows, maybe that'll be invalidated with a small text change on the card and the way it operates. But as of right now, it looks like anytime it gets hit, the next round, draw a card. It'll probably be changed to the first time it's attacked each round. I want to talk about Grandma's Fan, because this card is good news for me, because I have 2 failed Goda breeds that are the Goda Sandal Caterpillar, but they have, all of a sudden, I think this card is very, very usable. Randomly deal 4 hits. Your team gains 1 feather per enemy hit. I'm pretty sure feather will be a card that has like a simple effect like 10 damage or something along those lines, and it'll be free to cast, right? But you have to discard at the end of your turn. So if you Feather Fan, you would get 4 of them, and then you'd get 4 feathers. So then you would have 4 of those cards to use for whatever they end up doing. Maybe they're small heals. If this card is hit an enemy for hit an enemy for 35 damage, you get a card called Feather that you can use for free that heals an Axie for 10 HP. That means this card says, let me do a calculation, 35 times 4. So this 2 energy card does 140, but then would heal for 40. But I'm thinking if Feather Fan gives you a 0 cost card that is an attack, we can use this with Garish Worm, right? So we would have a Nemo on 1 so we can get the extra energy. Then we would Feather Fan. We use the Feather Fan, which would get pretty decent damage. And then use Garish Worm after we use all of those feathers that we get. Assuming that Feather is a card we can use for 0 energy. If that's the case, and I think it might be, Garish Worm would be disgusting. A Garish Worm Feather Fan Axie, but then its other parts would all have to be 0 cost or energy generation. But the implications are pretty wicked. What's your favorite card that's been leaked so far? What do you hope gets leaked next? What busted combination have you discovered? Have you been doing any theory crafting? Leave a comment down below and I'll try to get to it. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and thanks for hanging out.